So first of all, Martha, thank you so much for saying yes to this. It brings me so much joy. And to give you all some context on how I came across Martha's work. So I've read so many of her books, many of them I have right here. Her most recent one, Diana Herself, Martha, is my favorite. It's an allegory for awakening, and it's such a beautiful story. So if you haven't read it, definitely get that book or get any of her other books. And so I was a big fan of her work. As many of you know, she's written for a column regularly for O Magazine. She's been on Oprah. She's probably the best known life coach in the country, if not the world. And then I had the pleasure of taking her right into Light course, which is a program she offers online. And I was in her first cohort for that. And it was so helpful for me to reframe my writing in a new way. And you know, what I love about Martha is that she has followed her inner compass with so much truth and bravery in her life, whether that's walking away from a religion or moving onto a ranch in the middle of nowhere and taking walks in the woods and writing a book. You know, she's been willing to surrender all the shoulds and follow her true North Star, and then inspire all of us and give us permission to do the same. So I'm a huge fan of her and her work, and I'm so thrilled to bring her to you all today during this, you know, bringing calm to COVID virtual gathering, so that she can share some of her own wisdom around finding the light in the dark. So welcome, Martha.
Very much. It's wonderful to see your faces and your names, for those of you who aren't showing your faces yet. And I'm very grateful, Vanessa, for this opportunity and for the chance we have and the technology we have to get together in a time when we have to stay apart. It's so unprecedented in the history of humanity. So many things. The word unprecedented has become so overused. It's like going to die of overuse. It is so unprecedented that we have a global pandemic where we have instantaneous communications, we have television, and we have the technology to connect with one another. I was trained as a sociologist. My doctorate is in sociology. And so right from the beginning, I have been thinking, this is going to change absolutely everything in the world. And at first that was scary as hell to me. And it's still a bit scary. But I've come to think about it a little differently, and I would love to share with you sort of how I got there. So the first thing I wanted to acknowledge and validate is that it's pretty dark. But here's the deal. The darker it gets, the closer we are to the light. So this happens in all kinds of situations, but it happens in us as individuals first. So if we are to rebuild something, I was just going to say, things aren't going to go back to normal. Here's what's going to happen. If we access the light inside the dark, we will come into the brightest stage of human history ever. And that's, I will tell you something. I've been waiting for this my whole life. I didn't know that this would happen, but ever since I was very, very young, I had this feeling that I would be involved in a massive shift, and I didn't know what it was. As I got older, I thought about it all the time, never talked to anyone about it, but just kept thinking and thinking there's something's going to change, it's the way people think. That's how it's going to change things. How do I do that? So I went to graduate school in sociology to study the way social things form and the way people think, because I knew that I was supposed to be part of a shift in the way people think. And by this time, I'd started to notice that there were a lot of other people who seemed to be like me. Like they were interested in healing, they were interested in psychology, they were interested in animals, they were interested in storytelling, they were interested in the arts, they were interested in science. I finally realized that these types of people exist in all cultures, and in every traditional culture, these people are the ones who are seen as the medicine people. And it's something that's born. The elders of the village notice it happening. And they say to a little kid, oh, you have this archetype, we'll train you to be a healer, excuse me, to be a healer. So I learned and learned, and I thought and thought, and after a while, I came to think this isn't just a change in the way people think that you could write in a book and everything would be fine. It's a type of change that will completely recreate us from the inside out, that will break the darkness that humans have lived in for centuries, and will send us into a time of transformation like nothing we've ever seen. I started to believe that this had to happen on a global scale, because if we don't find this transformation, if we don't enact and embody this transformation, we would see other exponential growth curves, like the things about climate change and population growth. And now we know what exponential growth curves look like. Believe me, it's very serious, but until it gets really serious, we don't really take it that seriously, right? That's just the human nature. So after I also studied Asian philosophy, I was a Chinese major as an undergraduate, and I realized after reading a great deal about medicine people, shamans, the holy people, the healers of all the Sangoma in Africa, all the people I had met in my studies and my travels who were part of this healer group. And then I looked at all these Americans who were walking around looking for the light inside the dark, feeling like they were supposed to be healers, and also not just America, but the whole developed world, feeling that they were meant to be part of this transformation. I remember going into Deepak Chopra's office once. I was giving a speech at his campus in Carlsbad, California. And I went into his office to get ready, and on his desk was this document that said the transformation of consciousness and how to achieve it. And it was a group of scientists who were joining together to try to figure out what this was. And he came into the office, and I picked up the paper and I was like, you know about this, you know about this. Like, I hadn't actually talked to people about it. I hadn't written about it yet. And that was when I realized, oh, a lot of people are into this. This is really happening. So my whole career, I've been saying, yeah, we find the light inside the dark and we spread it by being the light. If you went, Vanessa went through our Ride into Light course, and it had 3 sections. Be the truth, start telling the truth, be the change, as in be the change you wish to see in the world, and then be the light, which happens when your consciousness begins to shift. And since I did know a little bit about Asia, I realized that this shift is what's known in Asian cultures as awakening or enlightenment. And we don't have a concept for it in Western cultures, but it's actually been recognized all around the globe in many, many different populations in times when they weren't communicating with each other. And it's been described exactly the same way, by Buddha, by Jesus, by Shakespeare. Dante, I think, had an experience like this, and that's why he was writing about going through hell to get to heaven. And these people had similar experiences, and they often encountered an actual bright light, and then they began to embody it. So when they embodied it, this shift happened, and it still happens to people, where suddenly they pop out of suffering. Their fear goes away, and they become completely aware of their connection to all beings and all things. And it's irreversible. They become these beacons of hope and peace. I've met a few people like this. They're amazing. I was talking to my friend Liz Gilbert about her recent trip to India. And before she went to India, she saw on television, which is rare, she doesn't watch much TV. She saw on TV this woman who'd been lost in the jungles of Hawaii for 17 days. She'd gotten lost, she'd fallen off a cliff, she broke her leg, she walked 40 miles on a broken leg. She had to bury herself in mud at night to keep warm and keep the insects off. And she looked on TV, Liz said, really like lit up and happy. So Liz goes to India, and she goes to an ashram where they're doing an event that has only 70 people at it. And one of the people is this woman who was lost in the jungle. So Liz went up and said, I saw you on TV. Like, how are you this happy? How are you this lit up? And she said, it got so dark, it got so bad that at one point I just felt like I was going to snap. And so I closed my eyes and I prayed that when I opened my eyes, please let all my fear be gone. And then she opened her eyes and all her fear was gone. And she said she was filled with this incredible joy. Her physical pain didn't cause her as much. She wasn't as scared. She wasn't scared at all. Yeah, it was pain, but suddenly with no fear, pain was much more easy to deal with. She started to see or experience the trees and the rocks as having a communication with her, a sort of spiritual oneness. Instead of alone, she became all one with everything. It's a classic enlightenment story, and it's irreversible. You don't go back from that. But the best way to get there is to go through the inferno. The only way, what I always tell people is, here's your best friend, suffering, because it will not stop bothering you until you've gone all the way through your darkness and toward the light. So how do you do that? That's what I want to teach you a little bit about today. So I used to go to a pain management clinic because I was very sick for a long time, which I'll talk about in a minute. And above the door, there was a sign that said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And what they taught me there was that pain is in the body is hard to handle, but suffering comes from things like our fear about what's happening to us, our fear about what will come in the future. There are schools of therapy that refer to something called clean pain and dirty pain. So clean pain is pain that comes from what happens. You break your leg, it hurts. You deal with the pandemic, it's painful. You get sick, it hurts. Dirty pain, or what I just called suffering, is pain that comes not from an event, but from our thoughts about an event. So I had three long-term, incurable, progressive autoimmune diseases that kept me bedridden for about 12 years at one point. And the pain was very real. But most of my suffering came from not knowing what was going to happen, creating fantasies about, either dying from this or living in pain, unable to go out or do anything for the rest of my life, not being able to mother my children. What would happen to us financially? I needed to work. I mean, there were so many fears, and that was enormously painful, much more painful than the actual physical symptoms. What I learned during those 12 years was how to address the darkness in my mind. And this is something you can do right now at home today, every few minutes if you want to. And it will take you right through the heart of the inferno and drop you on the path to paradise every single time. You may have to do it a lot of times, but it actually always works. This is part of why I became a coach, because I wanted to teach people how to do this. The way we stay sane in a world that has always been dark and uncertain is to know a method of going into our own darkness and through it to the light. And I'm going to take you through a little methodology for doing that. One thing I learned is that the body hates anything that the soul believes to be a lie. So if I told myself I'm going to suffer for always, I would feel much more suffering. And if you study psychoneuroimmunology, which I did after I had nothing but time during those 12 years, you'll realize that the body goes weak and the spirit goes into depression or rage the moment we start to believe something that isn't true to our deepest heart of hearts. And as I lay there sick, I started to divide the thoughts that made me feel worse from the thoughts that made me feel better. And the thoughts that made me feel worse were my catastrophic fantasies about how the darkness would just overtake me. Well, the things that made me feel better were things that frankly were considered impossible. Like, I can get over this. I think I will be healthy again. I think I'll be okay. And I didn't believe them because the doctors didn't say so. But because they made me feel so better, I decided to sort of act as if I believed them. And I found myself loosening, and the pain, which was extreme for me, started to go away. And I was like, that is really weird. Let me follow this up. And I started directly tracking my darkness and considering it my best friend, because here's what I found. The opposite of my darkest thought is always my next step to awakening, to enlightenment. I'm not enlightened, but I'm on my way. I'm either going to get it or die trying, I'll tell you that. And as Teresa of Avila said, all the way to heaven is heaven. So here's how you find the light inside the dark. I use a methodology some of you may be familiar with. It's from teacher Byron Katie. She was a woman who was suffering horrible depression, years and years of depression and anxiety and hostility. And she was just psychologically a very miserable person. And then one day she woke up, and like a lot of people who describe enlightenment experiences, she had suffered so much. And then one morning she woke up and the suffering was gone. Just like the woman from the jungle, just like Eckhart Tolle, like other people who report kinds of experiences all over the world. By the way, this has been studied neurologically. It is an actual brain phenomenon. They can take people who are awake in this way and look at their brains, and they find that the brain is different. I think actually that this switch from the dark to the light is something called an epigenetic switch. It's something about the way our genes form us. And some genes can be turned on and turned off during our lifetime. For example, if they take mice and expose them to cherry blossoms and then give them a shock, they become afraid of cherry blossoms. Normally they're not. But their offspring, who have never seen cherry blossoms or had a shock, if you show them a cherry blossom, the baby mouse will be afraid of cherry blossoms. It inherited a trait from the parent that was switched on in the genes. I think enlightenment is actually that kind of process. So Byron Katie experienced it just spontaneously. But she also came up with a method for inquiring, she calls it, for examining all her fear thoughts, just the way I examined mine as I lay in bed for 12 years and gradually got all better and all my symptoms went away. She has this very simple system that she calls inquiry, and you use 4 questions and then something called a turnaround to examine your darkest fears. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I've been afraid of and how I go forward into the dark and then burst in through the darkest dark into the light. Just as a little background, not only was I sick for a lot of years, but I also had a child who was prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome, and I had to decide whether or not to terminate, and I chose to keep the baby. And I was pregnant for another 3 months, 2 or 3 months, and I was absolutely terrified. It was such a dark time. I could see nothing positive in this, nothing. The best case scenario was that he would be emotionally and intellectually handicapped for his whole life. The worst case scenarios just went into, I won't even tell you, I read all these things about heart problems and seizures and blah, 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 all these things that can happen to babies with Down syndrome. And I already loved him, so this was not a cheerful time for me. And then, as Vanessa said, there came a time when I left the religion I'd grown up in, which was I grew up in a very religious family and community and state. Guess which one? But I was living there while I was raising my little boy and his 2 sisters, and I started to have flashbacks from my childhood of being sexually abused. And they were very, very severe. And when they first came back, or the day before they came back, I was teaching a social psychology class, and I was in one of those little rooms with a one-way mirror where I was with 2 or 3 students watching the class interact. This was part of the social psychology teaching. And the group there got into a discussion about date rape. And the women, several of the women started describing things that had happened to them. And as I heard this, I just felt like I had to get away. I had to get away. I ran out into the hallway and just passed out cold. Woke up, they were taking me into surgery because there was something wrong with my nether regions. And they thought it might be a tumor or something. They found out it was just blood. It was coming spontaneously from parts of my body that had been ripped and then formed jagged scar tissue when they healed, and they had spontaneously reopened and were bleeding into my abdomen. In the middle of that surgery, that the surgeons did to figure out what happened, I was lying on a table, my eyes were taped shut, I was anesthetized. I opened my eyes and looked around at the surgical lights, and then I thought, but my eyes are taped closed. And at this, I sat up and looked around, which was weird because I was lying flat on my back, anesthetized. I sat and watched the surgeons operating on me and saying, we can't find anything but blood, what's going on in here? And I was kind of like, what do I do now? It was such a strange experience. So I lay back down, and the surgical lights were very, very, very bright. And as I wondered what to do next, a ball of light about the size of a golf ball appeared between the surgical lights. And it was so much brighter than the surgical lights that it's like holding up a candle to the sun. It was so bright, and it had colors I'd never seen. They all were white light because they were all together. White light is every color, but we only see a trillionth of the available light spectrum. And I was looking at this light that was, without question, by far the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I was fascinated by it, and it started to grow. And when it hit things, it didn't bounce off them. It seemed to go into them so that everything started to shine. And then it touched my body. And the feeling that came with it was so sweet, so warm. It had so much love, inexpressible love. And it was full of joy. It was laughing for joy. And it just filled all of me. And I started to cry, and the surgeons saw tears sliding out of my eyes, and they got really worried that the anesthesia wasn't working. And they said, oh my God, she's in pain, give her more anesthesia. The anesthesiologist went to put more drugs in my system, which is quite dangerous. And then he told me later, because I went and asked him what had happened, he said he heard a voice say, don't increase the medication. She's not in pain. She's crying because she's happy. And he told me later, did I do the wrong thing? Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. Were you in pain? And I was like, no. So the light filled me up. And the first thing we did was just like rollick, like a basket of puppies. There was so much joy. I was so free. And there was just laughter everywhere, and the light was sort of telepathically saying to me, you thought all that suffering was real. You said you wouldn't forget, but of course you forgot. As soon as you became human, there you went, forgetting what's real. And I was laughing and saying, it totally fooled me. I can't believe I thought that everything was darkness, and because all I would look at was one level of reality. And this was so much more real, you guys. And I woke up from that, and I was just sobbing with happiness. And the nurses were very kind. They were like, oh, honey, it'll be all right. And I'm like, I know, it'll be all right. I love you all so much. And would you please give me more of the anesthesia? And that's when they got the anesthesiologist, and he told me that wasn't the reason. But I said, do people ever cry like this because they're happy? And they were like, not really. So I later learned that this is often part of a near-death experience, but it's also part of an experience of people who are like prisoners of war or have suffered from torture or famine. You have this light comes when you're at your very darkest place. And the method I'm going to work through with you is the method that got me back to feeling and connecting with the light, because the one thing the light left me with more than anything else, I mean, it told me all kinds of things, but the one thing it told me was, you don't have to die to feel this way. This is the way you're supposed to feel when you're alive. You can feel this way when you're alive. All of you can feel this way when you're alive. Go find out how to feel this way while you're alive and then tell people. So I began devoting my life to this, and that's when I thought, oh, the transformation of consciousness involves the connecting with that light, because that is who we are. That is everything that connects us. So I told you I was having, insomnia and all the dark forebodings and everything at the very beginning of the rise of the COVID virus, the coronavirus. And so I used Byron Katie's methodology on some of my worst fears, and I'm going to show you how it goes. The 4 questions are, you just ask yourself if the thought is true. If it seems true, you say, okay, if I put the thought deep into my heart and let it go all the way down, and then ask if it's true, what do I feel? The 3rd thing is, when I believe that thought, what happens? How do I react? And the 4th thing is, who would I be without that thought? So my biggest fear one night was, this disease is coming for all of us. Oh, and after the 4 questions, you do a turnaround, which is the opposite of the original statement, to see if it could be just as true as the original. So my fear was, this disease is coming for all of us. Is it true? Well, no, not all of us will get it. All right. But it feels like it's coming to everybody. Okay, but if I drop it down into the depths of my being, is it coming? It's coming for all of us. Is that true? No. Okay, so I feel that no deeply in my heart, and it just comes from that sense of truth that's at everybody's core. So the next question is, how do I react when I believe it? This disease is coming for all of us. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was desperate to protect my children. I was terrified. Obviously, it was making me feel horrible, and I wasn't sure it was true. So the next question is, who would I be without that thought? I thought, without that thought, I'd be watching this curiously, but much more calmly. So we're finally to the point where we bring calm to COVID. And then I got to do the turnarounds. One turnaround of, this disease is coming for all of us, is, we are all of us coming for this disease. Like, here comes the scientists, here come the doctors, here comes everything we do as humans, all of us. And I thought, oh my gosh, for the first time, we're all doing something at once, the whole globe. We're all coming together because of this disease. We're going to get it. We're going to kick its ass. We are coming for this disease. Then another thing, I sometimes switch out the villain of a sentence with my higher power, or with love, which is my higher power. So if we do that turnaround, it becomes, love is coming for all of us. I thought, how could that be true? And I realized that I had been shattered open by the darkness that I'd faced in my own life, with my health, with my son, with the abuse stuff, PTSD. I'd been shattered open so that love could reach me. Because when we're always following the light and we don't turn and go into the darkness, we don't turn on the lights. We don't go deep enough to allow ourselves to be open to love, because that involves being vulnerable, and that's scary. But when we've already faced the deepest darkness and we're investigating it with our minds, it cracks us open. As Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So that is how the light gets in. Okay, so there was one example. I'm going to do 3. The second one is, we're all going to get sick. Okay, is it true? Again, no. Does it feel true? No. How do I react when I think it? Same as before. Same exact. All the thoughts are kind of boring. They sort of are reiterative. So I go into panic when I believe it, but who would I be without it? I would be well. I would be well in my heart, in my mind. The dirty pain would be gone. And the turnaround for that is we're all going to get well. And again, I thought, yeah, all my life, I've been thinking that there's going to be an event that transforms human consciousness so that we no longer suffer as a species, so that we can turn around the damage we've done to this fragile ecosystem of a globe, so that we can live in harmony without oppression and without war and without all the things that have been dark throughout history. It's coming. Every single person on earth has changed his or her behavior significantly because of this virus. Every single person. If we're going to transform human consciousness, everyone has to be touched. What else could touch everyone so strongly that it changes our physical behavior? It's hard to think of anything that could unite us so much. So we're all going to get well. I do believe that when we pass away, we become more well than we've ever been before, because that light, once you've seen it, it's much more real than anything else. So we're all going to get well. Those of us who survive, and it will be almost everyone, will be changed in a way that will make us healthier, calmer, more able to accept our mortality, whatever it is that makes us feel like we're in the dark. We're not going to have darkness anymore. We will be enlightened. And my third thought was death is the end. Is that true? I don't know. If I ask my deep self, it says no. How do I react when I think death is the end? I grasp, I clutch. I am afraid of aging. Stupid. I'm terrified of the virus. Without that story, who am I? I'm the woman connected to that light that was filling me with warmth and love beyond anything I can possibly describe to you. And the turnaround is death is the beginning. It also could be life is the end. You know, Eckhart Tolle says, life has no opposite. The opposite of death is birth. Life has no opposite. It's so funny because as I'm talking to you here in Pennsylvania, this incredibly dark cloud has come over the sky and it's pelting down rain, and it's almost as dark as night right now. You may be able to hear the wind. It's crazy. I've never actually seen a storm like this here. So if you hear that, that's what's happening. But I want to tell you how this, my gosh, it's so loud. Can you hear it, Vanessa?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's wild. It's deafening here. So I want to tell you a story that happened after I'd been doing this methodology for years and years, teaching it to other people, helping people change their lives with it, helping them with times that felt dark to them, and teaching them that darkness is actually a friend. Go in, go in, go in. It's the way to paradise if you know how to go through. So one day, my son with Down syndrome was about 19, and his best friend had lost his dad to cancer 8 years earlier. And now his mother was dying of cancer. And she asked me and my partner if we would look after her kids who would be orphaned. And we said yes. And we went to the funeral. Adam and his friend Joey were there, and it was so sad. It was absolutely heartbreaking. And Adam was a pallbearer. And as we got in the car to go home, Adam said to me, I didn't cry. And I said, yeah, but it's okay to cry at sad times, and this is a very sad time. And Adam thought about that for a while. He's very hard to understand. He doesn't talk much. So he thought about what I said, that it's okay to cry and it's a very sad time. And he said, it's not so bad since the light came and opened my heart. And I said, what? Did I hear you right? A light came and opened your heart? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, where did this happen? And he said, in my room, my bedroom. I said, when? And he said, May 10th. And I was like, this year? And he was like, no, I was 13. So he kept this secret for 6 years. And he said he was in his room feeling sad and a light had appeared. And when it touched his heart, it opened his heart so that he could absorb what was sad and still find happiness. And he said, yeah, after that, nothing is so hard after the light comes. And I said, wow, I've never said anything about this, but I saw that light once. And he looked at me like, wow, I didn't know you were capable of these things, Mom. And I said, yeah, it came and it told me that even though we can't always see it, it's always with us. And he said, oh, I can see it. And I said, what? You can see it like all the time? And he said, yeah. And he looked at me like, oh, I thought you were kind of slow, and you are. He said, yeah, I can see it all the time. And I said, well, where is it? Is it by the ceiling? Is it in your head? Is it in your heart? And he just shook his head and he kind of chuckled and he said, Mom, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. You guys, it is everywhere. As dark as this is, everything I started with that was so dark that people were freaking out, every single one of those is a pathway to awakening, to enlightenment. If you can question your own fears and look at the opposite, you will find that your mind has chosen ideas that are not actually true. You're experiencing mostly what I called dirty pain, and it's optional. The real pain is happening, but most of the pain we're feeling is optional. So right now, as we end, I want you to go through this little exercise that I've shown you with me. Oh, and by the way, you should go to Byron Katie's website. Her name is Byron Katie, B-Y-R-O-N. Different word, Katie, K-A-T-I-E. She demonstrates it, and you can get a printout for this. So I'd like you first to take a great big deep breath and then blow all of the air out of your lungs. People say take a deep breath, but that actually isn't what calms us. It's breathing out that tells the brain that we're safe, because the brain is checking our levels of carbon dioxide, and when we don't ever breathe out, those levels climb. But no animal that was ever saved from danger, that was ever in danger, ever did this until they were saved. Right? That's the signal that we're okay. So the out breath, take deep breaths, but long out breaths. Then grab a thought that scares you. Grab a thought that makes you unable to feel calm. And it might be something like a loved one's going to die. I won't get my job back. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be horrible. It's the beginning of the apocalypse. Whatever it is for you, take it, write it down after this class is over if you want to, so that you can really examine it like a detective. Now, one of the things that happens when you do that is that your brain switches from the fear itself to the part of the brain that observes what you're thinking about. And the part that observes is calm. It's not afraid. So the very act of starting to question your thoughts will calm you if you do it genuinely. So let's say I'm going to get sick is your thought. All right. Is it true? And I don't know means no. It's not for sure true. Okay, so if you don't know, the answer is no. But if you still feel like it's true, go to the next question. If I drop this question like a penny in a wishing well down to the bottom of my soul, my heart and soul, and try to see if it's true, can I absolutely know that this scary thought is true? and sit with it. Sometimes I have to sit with these for like 10, 20 minutes before an answer comes back. But when the thought is scary, the answer is always no, it's not true. That scary thought is not true. You may not understand why it isn't true, but it's not. Okay, so then, like a scientist, just examine what happens when that thought's in your mind. It's like seeing if something's poisonous. You eat it and see how you react. So that thought in my mind, I'm believing it. How do I react? It's usually with a lot of panic, a lot of attempts to control things that we can't control, a lot of grief, a lot of every bad feeling. So just notice that that is the effect of believing this thought. And then go, if you can, imagine that you fall asleep and you wake up and something's changed in your brain. And the only thing that's changed is that you're unable to think the scary thought that you just wrote down, like, I'm going to get sick. It's not that you don't remember it, you can't formulate it, it's gone. Imagine waking up that way and feel, who would I be without the thought? Calmer. It's almost always calmer. Sometimes it's really, really happier, but at the worst, it's calmer. So, you know, I told you when Adam was diagnosed, I thought there was no good in the situation, none whatsoever. This child was coming to ruin my life. And the turnaround for that is this child is coming to heal and bless my life. So take your thought, I'm going to get sick, turn it around, I'm going to get well. Could that be true? In the deepest sense. I'm going into darkness. The whole world is going into darkness. Is that true? I don't know. Does my soul think it's true? The whole world is going into darkness. No, no, no. The part of me that feels that light knows that that's not true. Who am I when I believe the thought? Frantic. We've all felt it. I'm not even going to bother describing it again. Who would I be without the thought? The whole world is going into darkness. Strangely, calmly curious, able to love, able to help, able to reach out to people who are sick or are scared. I'd be stronger. Okay, so what's the opposite of the whole world is going into darkness? The whole world is going into light. You, me, we are going into light. It's happened to a few people always on the globe, but it's never happened to a large number of people. The darkness is so strong because it is about to give way to the brightest light humanity has ever been able to embody. The whole world is going into light. How does that feel? This is how I live my days. And after the first few days when I did that and I got rid of the dirty suffering, I started sleeping again. I started to be able to handle all the news. I know that I can't just watch the news all day, or I start to get hooked back into the dirty pain, but I know how to back away and do these exercises and find what's true inside me. And this is not just, it's going to be okay, things are going to go back to normal. It's no, things are going to be better than they have ever, ever been. For me, for you, for us, for the planet, for the world, for other species. I believe we're seeing the dawn of a whole new way of being human on this world, where it's not killing people that gets you in the history books, it's keeping them alive. It's not grabbing things that makes you important, it's nurturing. You know, it's everything is going to go from our darkest dark to our lightest light. And that's why this is coming for all of us, not to hurt us, but to heal us. So you have your own perspective in this light. In you, consciousness, the divine, whatever you want to call it, is experiencing this world as a human being through a unique perspective, your own set of eyes. No other eyes are the same as yours. No other life is the same as yours. Consciousness wants to wake up in your life, your body, your experience, because that way you can share an absolutely unique gift with the whole world. And every single one of us is needed. And we can do this while we're quarantined. The best way to start waking up in Asian philosophies is to go somewhere by yourself and refuse to come out until you've looked at all your fears and resolved them. And that's awakening. And it's being imposed on us so perfectly, everyone at the same time. But here's the thing, we need everyone. We need you. So I'm terribly sorry that there's so much darkness and so much pain, but you guys, when you start to do these things to calm yourself, it doesn't stop just with calm. It sails on. It doesn't just get us out of the inferno. It takes us all the way to paradise. It takes us into beauty and harmony and love. And we're already seeing that coming out in so many ways with so many more people than have been bringing darkness. So yeah, use this to light up, because the light of the world is you. And that's what I have to say about that.
Oh, wow, Martha, thank you for bringing you. I feel like we went on Dante's Inferno journey with you. It just went down into the dark and we came out the other side through the light. And so this whole talk was like a metaphor for everything that you're teaching. And it was beautiful. And also perfect that people on the call had resistance to going into the darkness in the beginning. And now everyone's really joyful that we came through the other side. So hopefully everyone can take that as their own teaching moment to surrender to your own individual darkness and move into the light. And I got chills when you did the turnaround that we're all coming for this disease. And I just got like whole body goosebumps. So I loved applying Byron Katie's the work and her 4 questions to the coronavirus. And we posted a summary of that in her book. And then I really also loved the clean pain versus dark pain. And, you know, it reminds me of some of Tara Brock's work on the second arrow, where we have the painful event and then we have our mind's story about the painful event. And she calls that the second arrow. And I just wanted to share from my own personal experience, several people in this community know that almost 4 weeks ago, my mom was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. So she's been transitioning during this pandemic, and she actually fully transitioned yesterday.
Vanessa.
No, thank you. But, and I'm still, I don't want to, I'm in my own process with that. But what's been really interesting is the last 3 weeks, I've noticed a really difference between what I'm calling anticipatory grief and authentic grief.
Yeah.
Where I would have moments where my mind would be telling me a story like, this is the last time you're going to be in her house with her. This is the last, and I would feel this sadness. But I was like, wow, I'm anticipating the grief. I'm not yet even fully in it. Versus there were other moments that was like this authentic welling within me of sadness that just like a wave of grief that felt more authentic. And so I've really been noticing the difference between the anticipatory and the authentic grief and allowing the waves to move through me.
Yeah.
And when I allow those waves, they pass through actually much easier than I would have ever imagined. And I had a profound moment yesterday of like feeling this light and having this new light come in last night and this morning. So it all feels very apropos of,
gosh.
Yeah, so I'm in a weird space of like, yes, the sadness and the grief, but also feeling so much light. And it's just really, it's been such an honor to like experience, and it feels so connected to everything you just shared.
It's such a sacred time, and I'm so sorry for your loss, and I hear what you say about the light. You guys, someone just handed me this. I forgot to even mention this. I designed a course to help people get through this. It's called Practical Wayfinding, How to Thrive When Everything's Falling Apart. And you can go to my website to find it. I always forget that I'm supposed to do those things. But Vanessa, what an incredible thing you've done, showing up the day after your mother's transition. And I can see you shine on this very, very, what would be a very dark day. I mean, everybody look at this face. It's lit. We're all waking up. We're all becoming the light. Oh, Vanessa, thank you so much.
No, thank you everyone for being part of this lovely community. And I'm grateful to know, I was excited, like I get to be in the light for an hour and then I'll go back to my grief, and it's just a dance. Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to bring up, Martha, right before you joined, just in terms of questions from the community, there was a theme that came up. Karen from Chicago asked, she's leading a workshop tomorrow for a big healthcare company doing all these wellness initiatives. And she was asking about strategies for families with small children, especially women, during this time. And then we also had a single mom who posted and said, it's just so hard. It's so tough right now.
Yep.
And so I was just curious if we get you to put on your like coaching hat for a second, what strategies or advice or wisdom you might share with some of the parents who are struggling with homeschooling and working. And
yeah, the thing you have to do, it starts with sitting quietly alone in a room and finding like the place at your center. And you do a very simple meditation by saying breathing in, breathing out, and make sure your breath doesn't get shallow. When your child is screaming for the 5th hour in a row, or you just can't handle your living situation anymore, if you, right in the middle of all the chaos, start being conscious of the breath, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. So you're diapering your baby and you're thinking, breathing in, breathing out. The baby's screaming, you're thinking, breathing in, breathing out. And it activates that witnessing part of the brain, which is not on either side of the brain. It's not a left brain, right brain thing. It's at the back, where mystical experiences also light up the area. So just by focusing on the breath, it kind of gives you a little bit of leeway. And then, of course, any opportunity that you can create to make everyone happy at once, get very creative about it. When I was home with little kids, when I was earlier in my own life, when I was sick, one of the things I did was I started finding things to watch on TV that all of us liked instead of just me. And it turned out that my kids, being like me, really enjoyed stuff that was really enjoyable to me. So I stopped playing Disney movies for them and started watching wildlife documentaries, and they were fine. So keep trying different methodologies to give yourself nurture while your kids or your loved ones are being nurtured. Put yourself at the center, put your own oxygen mask on first, breathe in, breathe out, get creative, and look for opportunities to change things up, because changing things up is what this is all about. My heart is with you.
Thank you so much. Beautiful advice. I was remembering Jack Kornfield's book, After the Ecstasy, the Laundry.
Yeah.
We can do all this work, and yet there's these daily tasks we're all trying to get through. So I appreciate the suggestions for that. And thank you so much for joining us today, Martha. It's just been a blessing to have you. And I really feel like you took us on the journey that you're meaning.
I probably should have warned you first. But yeah, that's what
it was perfect that you didn't warn us and we had resistance to the darkness and then we went through it. So thank you for that. Thank you for the light that you bring to the world. And we'll post the video, we'll share it, and we'll post a link to your Wayfinder program as well. So people, if you want to work with Martha, there'll be lots of ways to do that. I highly recommend it. Have a wonderful day and week, and light.
Hey, everyone. Be the light.
Be the light.
So much love, Vanessa. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel it.